There exists within every human being a profound longing, not for material possessions, not for superficial achievements, but for something far more essential. It's the longing to return home to ourselves, to that sacred place within where we once knew, with absolute certainty, that we were part of something infinitely greater than our individual existence. This isn't merely nostalgia. This is the soul's remembrance of its true nature, a quiet but persistent calling that grows louder in our moments of stillness, in those rare instances when we allow ourselves to pause from the relentless doing of life and simply be. Have you ever noticed how certain moments seem to stop time? When you're standing at the ocean's edge watching the waves roll in, or lying in the grass as a child tracing shapes in the passing clouds, in these moments, something extraordinary happens. The mental chatter fades. The endless to-do lists vanish. And for that brief, sacred instant, you exist in perfect harmony with all that is. This isn't just poetic language, it's the direct experience of your spiritual self, unmediated by concepts or beliefs. It's the you beyond the story of you. Our modern world has become expert at pulling us away from this knowing. We've created systems that reward constant distraction, that measure our worth by productivity rather than presence. From the moment we wake to the screens we check first thing in the morning, to the endless scroll before sleep, we're training ourselves to live on the surface of existence. But beneath this surface, your spiritual self remains, not as some separate entity, but as the deepest, truest aspect of who you are. Consider the metaphor of a radio. All day, every day, we're tuned to one particular station, the station of our thoughts, our worries, our daily routines. But just like a radio, there are countless other frequencies available to us. Your spiritual self is broadcasting on one of these other channels, sending signals through synchronicities, through that inexplicable sense of knowing, through the goosebumps you get when certain truths resonate. The static of daily life makes it hard to hear, but the signal never stops transmitting. The journey of reconnection begins with recognizing how we became disconnected in the first place. For some, it was a traumatic event that shook their foundations. For others, it was the slow erosion of time, where spiritual practices that once felt vital became relegated to special occasions, then to memory. Many of us can pinpoint the exact moment we started pretending we didn't need that connection, pretending we were too sophisticated for what our hearts truly longed for, pretending the material world could satisfy a hunger that was always meant to be fed by something more. But here's the miraculous truth: disconnection is itself part of the spiritual journey. In many wisdom traditions, the period of forgetting is seen as necessary for the remembering to take root at a deeper level. Think of the parable of the prodigal son. It was only after leaving home that he could truly appreciate its value. Your spiritual self isn't angry at your wandering. It's been waiting with infinite patience, knowing you would return when the time was right. The signs of disconnection manifest in subtle but unmistakable ways. That persistent feeling that something's missing, even when everything in your life appears fine on paper. The way certain songs or smells can suddenly transport you to a time when life felt more magical. The inexplicable tears that sometimes arise during moments of beauty. These aren't random occurrences. They're your spiritual self trying to get your attention, using whatever means available to remind you of what you've forgotten. Reconnection doesn't require abandoning your current life. It's not about moving to an ashram or giving up all your possessions, unless that calls to you. It's about bringing awareness back into your daily existence. It starts with simple questions. When did I stop singing? When did I stop dancing? When did I stop marveling at the miracle of existence? The answers to these questions hold clues to where and how you began to drift from your spiritual core. One of the most powerful tools for reawakening is what I call sacred memory. Take some time to reflect on your life's spiritual timeline. What were your earliest experiences of wonder? Who were you before the world told you who you should be? What practices or beliefs once brought you comfort and meaning? These memories are like spiritual breadcrumbs, leading you back to your essential self. The resistance you might feel to this process is perfectly normal. The mind, having invested so much in constructing your current identity, will offer countless reasons why this is a waste of time. It will tell you you're too busy, that this is self-indulgent, that you'll get to it someday when things settle down. Recognize this resistance for what it is, the fear of the ego facing its own impermanence. Your spiritual self knows no such fear. Nature offers us the perfect model for this reconnection. Watch how trees stand firm through seasons of change, how rivers continue flowing regardless of what obstacles appear in their path. They don't struggle to be what they are, they simply are. Your spiritual self shares this quality of effortless being. It doesn't need to be created or manufactured, it needs only to be recognized and allowed to breathe again. As we prepare to move deeper into this journey of reconnection, I invite you to consider this. What if the version of you that felt most spiritually alive wasn't some past self to be recovered, but actually your future self calling you forward? What if this sense of disconnection is actually the growing pains of your evolution? The truth is, you can't go back, nor should you want to. The goal isn't to recapture some past state, but to integrate all you've learned since then into a new, more authentic expression of your spiritual nature. In the quiet moments between thoughts, in the space between breaths, your spiritual self is already whispering to you. It speaks in the language of intuition, of synchronicity, of those inexplicable moments of grace that defy logical explanation. Learning to listen again is the first great step on this journey home. And the beautiful paradox is that the home you're returning to isn't some distant place, it's the very ground of your being, here and now, always available, never more than one conscious breath away. The path of reconnection begins with what I call the great remembering, that moment when the soul stirs from its slumber and begins tracing its way back home through the labyrinth of lived experience. This isn't about acquiring new knowledge, but rather about peeling away the layers of forgetting to reveal what your heart has always known. Imagine yourself as an archaeologist of the spirit, carefully brushing away the dust of years to uncover the artifacts of your own divinity. We live in a culture that worships the new technologies, new trends, new self-improvement techniques. But spiritual reconnection follows an opposite impulse. It asks us to become fluent again in the ancient language of our own being, to decipher those inscriptions our younger self left on the walls of our consciousness. Do you recall how, as a child, you instinctively knew certain truths about existence? How you marveled at the miracle of a butterfly's wings or sensed the aliveness in all things? That wasn't naivete, it was wisdom in its purest form. The practice of remembering operates on multiple levels simultaneously. There's the personal remembering, reclaiming those parts of yourself you've disowned or forgotten. Then there's the transpersonal remembering, the awakening to your place in the great web of existence. And finally, there's what the mystics call an amnesis. The soul's recollection of its eternal nature beyond space and time. All three are essential to full reconnection. Let's begin with the most accessible layer, personal remembering. I want you to conduct what I call a spiritual inventory. Set aside an hour with a journal and ask yourself these questions. What spiritual practices or beliefs once nourished me? When in my life have I felt most connected to something greater than myself? What childhood experiences shaped my understanding of the sacred? Don't edit or judge the answers, let them surface naturally. You'll likely find that certain memories carry an emotional charge. These are your signposts. One of my students, a successful lawyer, did this exercise and recalled how at age 7 she would climb a particular tree in her backyard where she felt closer to God. 50 years later, she returned to that tree, and in touching its bark, an entire dimension of herself came flooding back. This isn't sentimentality, it's spiritual reactivation. Your memories aren't just stories from the past, they're living portals to aspects of your consciousness waiting to be reintegrated. Now we come to the more challenging work, examining how and why you became disconnected. For many, it was a specific trauma or betrayal that made the spiritual world seem unreliable. For others, it was the slow erosion of wonder under the weight of worldly concerns. Some were taught that spirituality was childish, unscientific, or a sign of weakness. Whatever your story, this moment of honest examination is crucial. The parts of yourself you exiled didn't disappear, they went underground, continuing to influence your life from the shadows. Here's a transformative practice. Write a letter from your current self to the version of you that first experienced disconnection. Then write the reply. This dialogue often reveals profound insights about the spiritual contracts you've made with yourself, many of which may no longer serve you. A CEO client of mine discovered through this exercise that he'd associated spiritual connection with vulnerability after his father's death, and had been running from it ever since through achievement and accumulation. The transpersonal remembering is where we expand beyond our personal history into our cosmic belonging. Indigenous traditions speak of this as remembering our ancestors, not just our blood ancestors, but our spiritual lineage. Who are the teachers, living or departed, whose words resonate with your soul? What traditions or philosophies feel like home to your being? These connections transcend time and space, forming a golden thread that runs through human history directly to your heart. Modern physics confirms what mystics have always known: that at quantum levels, everything is interconnected. Your act of remembering isn't just personal therapy, it's participation in the universe becoming conscious of itself. When you reconnect with your spiritual self, you're realigning with the fundamental nature of reality. This explains why the journey often feels both profoundly intimate and cosmically significant simultaneously. The final layer, anamnesis, is the most mysterious. Plato taught that all learning is remembering, that the soul knows all truths before birth and our earthly journey is about recollecting them. In this context, your sense of disconnection is actually the necessary contrast that makes recognition possible. Like a fish that doesn't perceive water until removed from it, we often don't recognize our spiritual nature until we've experienced its absence. Practical tools for deepening the remembering. Create a spiritual timeline of your life. Revisit places of past connection. Re-engage with forgotten practices. Study the lives of those who inspire you. Notice recurring themes in dreams and synchronicities. As you engage in this work, you'll likely encounter what I call memory shards, fragments of past experience that suddenly take on new meaning. That song that always gives you chills, that book you've kept for years but never read, that recurring dream image. These are all pieces of your spiritual puzzle waiting to be assembled. Treat them with reverence. The resistance you may feel is actually part of the process. Your psyche has developed sophisticated defense mechanisms to protect you from what it perceives as the vulnerability of spiritual openness. When you encounter inner resistance, thank it for trying to protect you, then gently reassure it that you're now strong enough to handle the truth of who you are. Remember, this isn't about recreating some past spiritual peak experience. It's about gathering all the wisdom from your journey thus far and allowing it to inform your present moment. The you that you're remembering isn't behind you, it's within you, waiting to be fully embodied now with all the hard-won wisdom of your lived experience. In our next section, we'll explore how to integrate these remembered truths into your daily life. But for now, rest in this knowing. Every moment of spiritual connection you've ever experienced, every prayer, every moment of awe, every act of love, still exists within you. Not as memory, but as living reality. You're not rebuilding a lost connection, you're revealing an eternal one. Reconnection is only the beginning. What follows is the sacred work of reclamation, where we gather up the scattered fragments of our spiritual identity and weave them into a living tapestry of present moment being. This is where we move from remembering who we were to embodying who we truly are. The journey now takes us from the quiet reflection of memory into the dynamic practice of integration, where every reclaimed insight becomes a living breath of our daily existence. Imagine your spiritual self as a vast, ancient library that was boarded up during a storm. The remembering process helped you locate the building and peer through the windows. Now, we're stepping inside, dusting off the volumes, and bringing their wisdom into the light of day. But here's the crucial understanding: these aren't relics to be preserved behind glass. They're living texts meant to be annotated with your current understanding, their margins filled with new insights from the person you've become. The first law of reclamation is this: what doesn't grow, fossilizes. Many people make the mistake of trying to recapture some past spiritual peak exactly as it was, the meditation technique from their 20s, the prayer ritual from childhood. But your spiritual life must evolve just as you have. The practices that once served you may need adaptation to speak to who you are now. A woman who once found God in the strict rituals of her childhood religion might now discover the divine in the unstructured awe of forest bathing. Both are valid, the latter may simply be what her soul requires in this chapter. Let's explore the 3 pillars of effective reclamation. Sacred synthesis. This is the art of blending past spiritual wisdom with present moment understanding. Take a practice that once nourished you, perhaps journaling or walking meditation, and examine it with fresh eyes. What originally made it powerful? How might you adapt its essence to your current life circumstances? A busy parent might transform their former hour-long meditation practice into micro-moments of mindfulness while washing dishes or waiting in carpool line. The container changes, the essence remains. Threshold work. Spiritual reconnection inevitably brings us to thresholds. Points where we must decide whether to step forward into new understanding or retreat to familiar ground. These thresholds often appear as discomfort or resistance when old beliefs confront new experiences. A man who reconnects with his childhood faith might feel tension when certain doctrines no longer align with his expanded awareness. Threshold work teaches us to honor the wisdom in our roots while having courage to grow beyond their limitations. Embodied integration. True reclamation isn't complete until it moves from concept to cellular knowing. This is where we take insights off the meditation cushion and into our relationships, work, and daily choices. It's one thing to remember your spiritual self during quiet contemplation, it's another to access that awareness during a stressful meeting or family conflict. Embodied integration is the practice of letting spiritual truth seep into your bones until it becomes your default way of being. A powerful tool for reclamation is what I call the spiritual hybrid practice. Choose one element from your past spiritual life, perhaps a prayer from your childhood tradition, and combine it with something from your current understanding, maybe a mindfulness technique. Create a new ritual that honors both. For example, you might take the rosary beads of your youth but use them with a mantra that resonates with your present spiritual outlook. This isn't about dilution, it's about evolution. One of the most common obstacles in reclamation is what spiritual teachers call spiritual bypassing, using spiritual ideas to avoid dealing with unresolved emotional material. As you reconnect with your spiritual self, old wounds may surface that you'd previously numbed with spiritual practices. This is healthy and necessary. The fully reclaimed spiritual life isn't an escape from human experience but a more vibrant participation in it. If tears come as you pray, let them flow. If anger arises during meditation, investigate its message. Your spirituality isn't here to help you transcend your humanity but to help you fully inhabit it. Another essential aspect is community reclamation. While your spiritual journey is deeply personal, it doesn't have to be solitary. Seek out others who are engaged in similar work, not necessarily people who share your exact beliefs, but those who understand the importance of the quest. In many indigenous traditions, there's an understanding that some spiritual work must be done in community to be fully integrated. Consider forming a small circle where you can share experiences and witness each other's growth. The shadow side of reclamation is what I term spiritual acquisitiveness, the tendency to collect practices and insights like spiritual trophies without fully integrating any of them. Our culture's consumer mentality can infect our spiritual life, making us always hungry for the next retreat, the next teacher, the next technique. True reclamation often involves doing less, not more, going deeper with a few core practices rather than skimming the surface of many. As you engage in this work, you'll likely discover what I call bridge memories, experiences that seemed mundane at the time but now reveal themselves as spiritual lifelines you didn't recognize. That coffee shop conversation that subtly shifted your perspective, that stranger's kindness that restored your faith, that inexplicable urge to take a different route that led to an important meeting, these are all moments when your spiritual self was quietly guiding you even during your apparent disconnection. Recognizing them builds trust in the ongoing presence of your spiritual nature, even in times when you felt most disconnected. Practical tools for reclamation. Create a daily integration window. 10 minutes to reflect on how spiritual insights can apply to upcoming challenges. Develop personal rituals that blend old and new understandings. Keep an embodiment journal tracking how insights manifest in concrete life changes. Use art, movement, or music to express what words cannot capture. Establish regular check-ins with your spiritual self through journaling or meditation. The culmination of reclamation is what ancient alchemists called the unus mundus. The experience of no longer separating spiritual practice from daily life because all life has become sacred. This doesn't mean walking around in a perpetual state of bliss, an impossible standard that only creates frustration. It means developing what Brother Lawrence called the practice of the presence, the capacity to find the sacred in ordinary moments. As we prepare to explore the final phase of living from this reclaimed spiritual identity, consider this. The spiritual self you're reclaiming isn't some perfected version waiting in the wings. It's the you that shows up authentically in each moment, sometimes uncertain, often growing, always worthy. Your flaws and struggles aren't obstacles to your spiritual life, they're its raw materials. The cracks aren't where the light gets out, they're where it gets in. In our next section, we'll examine how to live from this reclaimed spiritual center in a world that often seems designed to pull us away from it. But for now, rest in this knowing, every act of reclamation, no matter how small it seems, is a revolutionary act in a culture that profits from our disconnection. By reclaiming your spiritual wholeness, you're not just healing yourself, you're participating in the healing of the world. The final stage of our journey brings us to the sacred art of embodiment, where remembered wisdom and reclaimed practices cease to be something we do and become who we are. This is the alchemical transformation where spiritual understanding moves from the realm of ideas into the cellular reality of your daily existence. We've arrived at the threshold where knowing becomes being, where practice becomes presence, and where all the work of reconnecting flowers into a new way of walking through the world. Consider the metamorphosis of a caterpillar into a butterfly. For the caterpillar, the idea of flight is pure theory. It can hear descriptions, see other butterflies soaring, even believe in the possibility intellectually. But only through the complete dissolution and reorganization of its very being does it truly know flight. Our spiritual embodiment follows a similar path. All our remembering and reclaiming has been preparing us for this complete reorganization of consciousness, not as an abstract concept, but as lived reality in every breath, every choice, every ordinary moment. The first principle of embodiment is radical presence. Most of us live suspended between memory and anticipation, our attention fractured by regrets about the past and anxieties about the future. Spiritual embodiment brings us fully into the now, not as a technique, but as our fundamental orientation to reality. This isn't the passive, being present of popular spirituality, but an active, engaged presence that transforms how we meet each moment. You'll know embodiment is taking root when you notice spontaneous moments of complete absorption. While washing dishes, during a work presentation, in the middle of an argument, where you're fully there, responding from deep wisdom rather than habitual reaction. Let me introduce you to the 3 dimensions of spiritual embodiment. Somatic wisdom. This is the intelligence of the body as spiritual instrument. Your physical form isn't just a vehicle for your spirit, it's an expression of it. Embodiment means developing sensitivity to the body's subtle communications. That gut feeling when something's off, the lightness in your chest when you're aligned, the tension that signals resistance. A powerful practice is the daily body scan, not as a relaxation technique, but as a conversation with your somatic wisdom. Ask, where is my body holding knowledge my mind hasn't yet recognized? Relational alchemy. True embodiment must be lived in relationship. It's easy to feel spiritually connected during solitary retreats, but the real test comes in our interactions. This dimension transforms how we show up with partners, colleagues, even strangers. You'll know embodiment is happening when you catch yourself responding to provocation with unexpected compassion, or when you sense the sacred in ordinary exchanges. Practice seeing each relationship as a spiritual gymnasium where your highest qualities get strengthened through use. Occupational sanctity. This is the infusion of spiritual consciousness into your work and daily activities. The division between spiritual practice and worldly work dissolves as you bring the same quality of attention to emails as to meditation. A teacher might discover sacred dimension in crafting lesson plans. A barista might find meditation in the rhythm of brewing coffee. Your vocation becomes vocation in the original sense, a calling to manifest spirit in form. The shadow side of embodiment is what I call spiritual materialism. The tendency to turn our awakening into another identity to defend. Watch for the subtle ways the ego tries to claim enlightenment as its achievement. I'm more spiritually evolved than others. True embodiment carries no pretension, it's simply the natural expression of a soul coming home to itself. The more authentically embodied you become, the less you'll feel the need to perform spirituality for yourself or others. A powerful tool for embodiment is the practice of microsanctification. Choose 3 mundane activities from your daily routine, perhaps brushing your teeth, commuting, or checking emails. Transform these into sacred rituals by bringing full presence and intentionality to them. Light a candle while paying bills. Say a silent blessing over your food before meetings. These small acts train the nervous system to perceive the extraordinary within the ordinary. Over time, the division between sacred and profane dissolves naturally. One of the greatest challenges in embodiment is navigating what spiritual traditions call the second arrow. The first arrow is life's inevitable pains, disappointments, losses, frustrations. The second arrow is our resistance to that pain. Embodiment doesn't spare us the first arrow, but it dissolves the second by teaching us to meet all experience with radical acceptance. You'll know this is working when you can be fully present with heartbreak without adding layers of "this shouldn't be happening" or "what's wrong with me." Another crucial aspect is the development of spiritual discernment. As you become more embodied, you'll naturally attract others seeking light. Learning to distinguish between healthy sharing and energy depletion is essential. True embodiment includes wise boundaries. The ability to say no with love, to conserve your energy for where it can truly serve. This isn't selfishness, it's stewardship of your sacred gifts. The collective dimension of embodiment deserves special attention. Your personal awakening contributes to what philosopher Jean Gebser called the ever-present origin, the field of consciousness we all share. Every moment you choose presence over distraction, compassion over judgment, love over fear, you strengthen this field for others. This explains why embodied people often report miraculous synchronicities. They're vibrating at a frequency where the universe can work through them more clearly. Practical tools for embodiment. The sacred pause. instituting 3 conscious breaths before responding in conversations, gratitude mapping, noting how spiritual insights manifest in practical life improvements, shadow dialogues, giving voice to resisted aspects of yourself in journaling, anchoring objects. Carrying small items that reconnect you to your essence, embodiment check-ins, setting phone reminders to assess your present moment rootedness. As embodiment deepens, you'll likely experience what mystics call the transparency of phenomena, the ability to perceive the divine intelligence working through all things while still engaging fully with worldly reality. This isn't dissociation, it's enhanced perception. The tree is both a biological organism and a manifestation of sacred geometry. Your colleague is both a personality and an expression of cosmic consciousness. This dual vision becomes your new normal. The final stage of embodiment is what I term authentic ordinariness. After the fireworks of spiritual experience subsides, what remains is the simple, unpretentious reality of being human, just with more light shining through the cracks. You'll know embodiment is complete when spiritual practice isn't something you do, but what you are when you're not doing anything special. When asked about your spirituality, you might find yourself at a loss for words, not because you don't know, but because the question no longer makes sense, like being asked to describe how you breathe. As we conclude this journey, remember, spiritual embodiment isn't a destination, but a manner of traveling. There will be days when you feel disconnected again. This is natural and part of the ongoing dance. The difference now is that you'll recognize these moments not as failures, but as invitations to deeper layers of integration. Your spiritual self isn't fragile, it's resilient and ever-present, like the sun behind clouds. The greatest gift of embodiment is this: you become a living bridge between worlds, between spirit and matter, eternity and now, the divine and the daily. In a world starving for authentic spiritual presence, your very existence becomes medicine. Not because you're perfect, but because you're real. Not because you have answers, but because you've learned to live the questions. And in this living, you'll discover the most profound truth of all, that what you've been seeking has been seeking you all along, and the homecoming you've longed for was never somewhere else, but always right here, in the sacred space of your own awakened heart.